The other day I was in the supermarket and I was buying some jam and I just got wondering, could I make something alcoholic like a wine or a beer out of jam? So I went online and I bought a big bag of raspberry jam and I'm gonna mix it with some cranberry juice and ferment it and see if we can make something delicious, alcoholic, maybe a little bit tangy, a little bit sour, fruity, but most of all super refreshing and something that I want to drink over the summer. So let's get into it. So the way this is gonna work is the jam is gonna act as the primary source of sugar for the yeast, which is gonna turn the sugar into alcohol. And for yeast, I'm thinking between two different types of yeast. I've got just ale yeast. This is good when you just want the drink to taste like what's going in. So that's option number one. Option number two is this yeast, which is a little bit more special. This yeast is called Philly sour. And what it does is it creates lactic acid and alcohol at the same time. So what that means is we get like a sour drink. And personally, I love a good sour drink because I think they're super refreshing, especially in the heat of the summer. I wanted to just make things a little bit more interesting with a little bit more mouthfeel, a little bit more like tartness or maybe astringency. So that's why I went and picked up cranberry juice. This cranberry juice is gonna add a little bit more sugar as well, a little bit more flavor. I wanted to keep things mostly berry themed as well. So the idea is to mix these two together in the ratio that will give me about 5% alcohol. Or, you know, I've got 3 bottles of cranberry juice, I've got 1 bag of jam. We'll just see how it comes out. Then I'll add some pectic enzyme because jam has pectin in it and pectin is gonna make this thing go cloudy or could even make it go like a little bit thick. So I'll put that in and leave that overnight. And then the next day we can pitch the yeast, which just means add the yeast and ferment it and see how it turns out. And then once it's fermented, I can add some to some bottles with a bit of sugar just to carbonate it. I've also got a carbonating kit now, so we can basically carbonate some straight away and just try it out instantly. So since all of this is pretty much sterile already, I don't need to actually boil anything. I can just sterilize my jar and just throw everything in. So that makes things way simpler. Get the lid as well. So I bought 3 bottles of these thinking that maybe even 3 wouldn't be enough, but it looks like 2 is probably too many. I don't want to fill this all the way up just because when it starts fermenting, it could create some bubbles. So I want to keep a little bit of headspace, but now we're just going to mix this together. From now on, anything that goes inside this jar has to be sanitized. So I have to say, it does smell really good already. And to be honest, from the sourness of the jam and the tartness of the cranberry juice, I feel like I don't really need to use the souring yeast. Maybe I can just use the ale yeast and see how it turns out. But this is definitely quite thick though. I think you can even just tell just from looking at this. So we're gonna have to add the pectin and let this sit overnight and we'll check on it tomorrow again. On second thought though, I've also heard that you can just add the pectin at the same time as the yeast and it doesn't really make much of a difference compared to doing the pectic enzyme first and then doing the yeast. So maybe I'll just do both at the same time. I don't have like a dropper or a teaspoon or anything, so I'll just put a straw in, grab it like that, and drop it in. And hopefully that's enough. This small pack of yeast can make quite a lot, so I don't really need to use much of this at all. We'll just add like that much. Give this another stir. Make sure to get all that yeast that's stuck to the side too. Airlock goes on, that's gonna stop any of this outside air going inside and contaminating it. And just to help even further, we're gonna use sanitizer instead of water. I'm not entirely sure how long this is gonna take, but I'm gonna keep watching this airlock because as this ferments, gas is gonna be produced and it's gonna come out of this airlock, which will just look like bubbles. So like this thing will bob up and down and bubbles will be coming out. We didn't even check how much alcohol could come out of this thing. Let's do that real quick. That was the whole point of doing this, was to see how much alcohol we can get out of this, and it was the one thing I was gonna forget to do. So let's do it real quickly. Depending on how this floats, will show me how much dissolved sugar is in the liquid. And this thing has a bunch of markings on it that, oh Jesus Christ, what? How much? That's a lot of sugar in there. So judging on where this floats, there's markings on this thing that's gonna tell me how much alcohol could come out of this. This like orange section here is like beer range. It's like 4 to 7%. And then the green underneath is wine. And this is floating on the high end of wine, which means this is gonna turn out at around like 11.5, 12% if this ferments completely. So that's quite strong. Let's just do it. Let's just try it out. Maybe I should have added less jam. Maybe we'll just have a really nice sparkling wine. Let's make sparkling wine then. Close this back up again, and now we'll set this fermenting. I suspect it'll ferment fairly fast just because it is so warm these days in Korea, but we'll come back once the activity has died down in the airlock and we'll do another sugar reading, and that should let us know how much alcohol is in there. I don't really know exactly how long it's been. Maybe like a week and a half since we started this, but I can say this has stopped fermenting. I think the bubbles have subsided, so yes, and today I'm gonna do a sugar check just to see if all the sugar has fermented into alcohol. If not, we can just leave this a little bit longer to ferment a bit more. I think if I recall correctly, if this is fermented completely, this should be around like 12% alcohol. So let's see. It smells absolutely delightful. It smells amazing. Yesterday, there was a lot of kind of like foam and scum at the top here, which is just a result from the fermentation, the gas being produced, pushing a lot of this debris up. And so by putting it in the fridge, we're cold crashing it, which is basically cutting down all of the activity and just making sure everything settles down, which has for the most part worked. It was only for one day. If we did it for 2 or 3 more days, this would probably compact down a bit more, but first I just want to get a sugar reading. This is flowing really high up, which means there's still quite a lot of sugar left in there. I don't know why this suddenly stopped fermenting all of a sudden, but there's still a lot of sugar left to ferment. If I was to drink this now, it would still be quite sweet and maybe only about 5% alcohol. So I'm just gonna leave this fermenting even more. I was a little suspicious with the amount of sugar that was in there that this should take a little bit longer to ferment, and this kind of proves my point. So we've got quite a bit more fermentation that needs to happen for this. So I'm gonna set this back and maybe give it another couple weeks. I think it would probably need up to a month for this to completely ferment. But yeah, this should hopefully start fermenting again and we can check back on it in another month. I mean, I can think of a couple of reasons why this might have stopped. One is just that it's actually eaten up all of the fermentable sugars and it's only unfermentable sugars left over. And then the other reason could be that the yeast can't ferment that high. Who knows, maybe it's just having a lull and it will shoot back up again in terms of fermentation, but let's just give it some time. Now I've let this sit for a couple more weeks. I think maybe 2 or 3 more weeks since the last time I checked up on this. And in that time, I have seen more bubbling and then it's subsided again. So I'm gonna give this another check and hopefully it's done. It doesn't matter if it's a tiny bit still sweet, but as long as most of the sugar is turned into alcohol, I want to move on to the next step for this. We are of course going to be using our hydrometer to check the sugar levels again. I will say this is still smelling absolutely fantastic, but it does smell like it's still quite sweet. Which, just as I suspected, this is still sitting at about maybe just over halfway fermented. So maybe this would be about 5 to 6%, which is kind of like a beer, but it does mean it's still gonna be very sweet. But you know what, we're done waiting now. I am just gonna process this and move on to the next step. What I will do in the meantime is I wanna give this a taste, just to see if it tastes as good as it smells, because it smells really good. And right now that's looking really clear, other than a few of the seeds from the raspberries, but it smells like, I don't know, it just smells so good. Don't get me wrong, that is very sweet, but it's also very tasty. You know what? If I carbonate this and serve this ice cold, this could be delicious. What I do need to do first is to transfer the liquid from here into here and try to exclude all of this sludge at the bottom. And we're gonna use physics. I've got a siphon here and I've placed this up high and this is down low, so we can siphon this into here and try to leave as much of this sediment at the bottom. My siphon is a little messed up, so this isn't gonna go as smoothly as I hoped it would. You know, I would have liked to have been able to grab this last bit of liquid right now, but just the way that my siphon is designed is that it's not really gonna pick up this last bit. So maybe I have to let this one settle a bit more, but for now this one we can probably bottle this because I'm pretty happy with how clear this is already. So let's get straight to bottling. So I'm guessing this is probably about 2 liters. So I've got 4 500 milliliter plastic bottles, which are pressure safe. I can carbonate in these. And then I've got dextrose, which is a very fermentable sugar. So this should help get these bottles carbonated fast. About half a tablespoon per bottle. Remember what I said about 2 liters? We're bang on 2 liters. Perfect. We'll just shake to dissolve the rest of that sugar that's just sat at the bottom there. Now these need to sit at room temperature for maybe a week or 2 to bottle carbonate. I'm not too sure exactly how long it will take, but I'm gonna keep feeling the bottles and just see how squidgy they are. Once they're nice and solid, then we should be ready to crack one of these open and give them a taste. But we'll check in once these are bottle carbonated. It's been a couple days, maybe even a couple of weeks that I put these into bottles to carbonate, but nothing has happened. They have not carbonated. So we're gonna give up on natural carbonating. Instead, I'm just gonna force carbonate these. So I'll just pour all of these into this bigger bottle, and then I'm just gonna carbonate this one big bottle. So I managed to fit about 3 of these bottles into this big bottle. So I do have a little one left over as well, which I can carbonate as well. So I'm gonna be force carbonating these using CO2. I have a CO2 tank here, but in order to actually carbonate these effectively, I need to get these really cold first, as cold as I can get them, because cold liquid will absorb CO2 a lot better. So these are gonna go into the fridge for a little bit first. So I can demonstrate how this kind of works. You can see this is CO2 coming into the bottle here. And every time I shake this, more CO2 is being dissolved into the water. And as more CO2 gets dissolved into the water, that means there's more space for more CO2 to come in. So every time I shake this, you see the bubbles increase, which means it's making more space for CO2 to come in. So by shaking this a lot, we can keep pushing in more CO2. Because shaking it increases the contact with the CO2 in the water, which dissolves it into the water. Let's open this up now and just see if it has carbonated. It's only been attached to the gas for maybe 20-30 minutes, but I feel like it should be at least a little bit carbonated that we can pour out a drink and have a sip, and we should have a good, nice carbonated mouthfeel. But let's open this up. So you can see all the bubbles coming out now. So that is fairly carbonated, which is good. And it smells really tasty. But I'm gonna put this back in the fridge just to let this settle down again. And then we should be able to crack it open a bit better. It's not super carbonated, but it's got a bit of bubbles. But let's give it a try when it's cold and with bubbles. It smells like juice. It smells like grape juice. It's so tasty. Now, mind you, that is alcoholic, but that tastes exactly just like juice. Yeah, it's like grape juice. It's like really good grape juice. Even though this is probably only half fermented and could potentially be like the strength of wine, I think basically like the yeast that I use probably isn't strong enough to turn this into wine. But that is basically like a really sweet beer at that point. And it's delicious, it tastes like juice. It's a bit dangerous because it is so sweet and fruity. You gave me a glass of that. It's like a dessert wine, but it's sparkling. I'd say you can turn jam into wine, and it might be one of the easier ways to get a great tasting wine or beer. Maybe I should try this again with some different jams too. Who knows? Or maybe some different yeast. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see me do more experiments like this, make sure you leave a comment down below with anything you want to see me do. And hit subscribe and like the video as well. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.